We're live. Good. Okay. Okay, everyone. We have come out of close. Sorry. Oh, so we appear to be missing a quorum at the moment. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Councillor Hayes. So we have come out of closed session where we had a discussion and received privilege information. And we are just going to take a 5-minute comfort break before we continue with the meeting. So we'll see everybody back here in 5 minutes. Okay, everybody, please come back. I'd love to know what Councillor Kelly is laughing about.
Just that's like the beginning of a song. Everybody, please come back.
You don't want to hear me sing, though. Believe
Well,
me.
I thought you were.
No. Okay, we need one more for quorum, and then we'll continue on. And there is Councillor Jagowitz. Okay. Okay, well, listen, welcome everybody. And now we are back into the public part of our agenda. We are going to have a brief informative information area on the site plan application and et cetera, and then we're going to move on to what is our main topic today, which is our official plan review, and that will occur shortly. And the aim today is to maybe tweak it somewhat on certain, I know we've got a few topics we would like to discuss. We will have our consultants here and hopefully be able to then move it on to our public meeting that is required by the Planning Act to have it come back to us so we can work on it as a council with our as planning committee, making those big decisions, hopefully to get the final draft ready to move it on to district. So that is the aim for today, to be able to quote, get it out the door for official public input. So having said that, we're going to, I'm going to ask Mr. Pink to please just briefly talk about the site plan agreements. And then we have our counsel, Mr. Engell here, who is going to give a brief overview for everybody's sake. And so I'm going to turn that over to you, Mr. Pink.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee again, and members of the public and staff. Obviously, this is a continuation of the August 12th Planning Committee meeting. This report was on that agenda. We unfortunately did not have time. However, we did hear several delegates speak to the matter. Just to provide some very quick background for committee, this discussion emanated at the July Planning Committee meeting when we heard delegations and some concerns respecting site alteration and tree removal occurring during the development of properties along our waterfront. At that meeting, committee requested several things of staff, particularly a legal opinion respecting the ability to revoke or place stop work orders on active building permits or in other methods to have construction cease, provide some year-to-date statistics, as well as a high-level outline of some of the continuous improvement activities that the bylaw enforcement function is overseeing. That report is on your agenda. I would again reiterate that those are not staff's necessarily recommendations or guidance. As outlined in the report, that was a legal opinion received in response to the request of committee. Again, I think the report is fairly self-explanatory. We did have several speakers on August 12th speak to that. I'm happy to answer any questions of committee that you may have on it, to either further clarify or expand. And we have invited Mr. Engell here, who certainly is a knowledgeable resource in this area, to also answer any general bylaw enforcement questions that committee members may have. Thank you, Mr. Engell, for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Engell. And if you could just briefly introduce yourself and give us, I would say, a general overview in terms of the site plan agreement and the bylaw enforcement and options for us here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been practicing municipal law for 32 years at WeirFoulds. I'm chair of the municipal planning group at the firm, and I've been editor of the loose leaf Ontario planning practice books for the last 16 years. So I've seen all manner of approvals and enforcement proceedings which take place in the provincial court, which is not my focus, but also in the superior courts in terms of injunction proceedings and other litigation. So what I can advise council on is that it's a complicated area. The municipality is not seen as another contracting party when it enters into agreements of the sort that are authorized under the Planning Act. It's not like between two businesses, and particularly with site plan agreements are there to secure the matters that are addressed in site plan approval. It's not just a free-ranging contract, but it does have aspects of conventional contracts. And so, as lawyers sometimes do, we have to hedge a bit because parts of it are a contract and parts of it are what I'll call a statutory contract. There's aspects to it that are not done in the normal course. And that also ties into any number of other bylaws that the municipality may have. So zoning bylaws, site alteration bylaws, tree protection bylaws, and that sort of thing. And for those, there's provisions that private parties don't have. Parties to a simple contract wouldn't have the powers that a municipality has under the Municipal Act. So you have tools, for example, the ability to go on somebody else's land. Private people don't have that. That's a trespass. Municipalities in the right circumstances can have that power under the Municipal Act. And then the power to make people pay for things that you've done that they should have done and put it on the tax rolls. There's a statutory system for that. So in looking at municipal remedies and how to craft agreements and how to enforce agreements and approvals, it all has to be measured within that rather complicated matrix. And then added on top of that, building permits are not treated the same, and they are not issued by council. Building permits are issued by the chief building official independently of council. And there's a building code and act that governs when they can be issued, when occupancy permits can be issued, what is done if there's a violation, and they have their own enforcement mechanisms within the building code system. So there's multiple layers there that color any assessment and interpretation of contracts, approvals, infractions, and remedies. And the courts are mindful of all of that when they are considering municipal applications. And judges have various levels of experience, but that's what lawyers are there to help them with, make sure that they understand that framework. And so in terms of injunctive relief, for example, municipalities don't have to prove one part of a test is irreparable harm. That's harm that can't be compensated for in damages. And as between two businesses, that's a test that they would have to make. But municipalities typically don't have to do that because breach of bylaws is seen as harm against and something against the public interest that's not simply compensated for by the award of damages. So there is sort of a nuanced treatment by the courts of municipal realm of enforcement of agreements, of bylaws, and of permits. And so it's a complicated and interconnected system that is not simply the same as private contract law. So that's sort of a high level review of the things that control your jurisdiction and affect your enforcement decisions. And some of that enforcement under the Municipal Act, you get to do. You don't, you're given those powers and you don't have to ask a judge for it. Other powers you need to go through and have a judge's approval for. And then the injunction remedy is separate and apart from most of that, but it has to dovetail with it. So that's sort of a high level summary of why it can be challenging to practice municipal law, and certainly challenging for council to come to grips with the various conundrums that you face from time to time, and put up with municipal lawyers who can't give you definitive answers to what are inherently complex problems. And so hopefully that's helpful, but I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that you may have, and focus on some things that I might have overlooked in that discussion.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions from councillors? I actually have one. In terms of an injunction, how does building on a building lot play into that? If the bylaws have been broken, but that has nothing to do with a building being built, Mr. Engell. Like what's the possibility of tying that together, I guess is what I'm sort of asking you.
Yeah, so where there is no building permit involved and there's work that's being done on a property that is contrary to one of your bylaws, then there's a fairly straightforward path there. When you bring in a situation where a building permit has been issued, so there's work that's permitted to be done under that permit, but there's other problems that arise on a site, that gets a little trickier because, again, control of building permits is through the chief building official, and they are obliged to act independently of council. So council can't tell the chief building official not to issue a permit. The act says that they shall issue a permit unless, and then there's a list of specific things that need to be checked off. And if you check those all off, then the chief building official shall issue the permit. So, and it's a long list, mind you, but once they do that, then that process is largely in the building department's hands in terms of revocation of that permit, or enforcement of things that fall under the ambit of that permit. So the interplay between that and other things that are happening on the property that are not, strictly speaking, regulated by that permit is, again, it's complex. There's not a straight line saying if you've done something else wrong on the property, then council can say, stop building, because that's not directly council's power. That the stop work order for a building permit comes from the building department through the chief building official under that legislation. Enforcement of other bylaws is done by under other authorities such as the municipal act and the bylaws that you have. So that, again, that's part of the complexity of it. There's not, it doesn't all go through the same filter and the same analysis.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have any questions? I see Councillor Kelly looks like he's trying to get his hand up. Maybe not. Yes, Councillor Kelly.
Sorry, thank you, and through you, and I'm under the circumstances not going to raise any issues at all, but I am going to thank Mr. Engell for his patience and for his good advice. So thank you very much.
Well, I think we'll all echo that for the time that's been spent this morning to really educate us. And so, Mr. Engell, I believe that we'll thank you and wish you a good day. And at this point, we're going to carry on with the rest of our agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we are now, I think have we got Mr. McDonald and Mr. Dyment?
Yes.
Yes, yes. Okay, so and are they here too? Have we got? Okay, terrific. Sorry, just checking on who's in the virtual room and who isn't. Okay, so we're going to hear from our two delegations first, and then we will continue with our discussion. So where am I finding? Is Margaret in? Oh, there you are. Ms. Walton, I can see you now, and Mr.
Yes.
Sift, I can see you. So whichever one of you would like to start, maybe Mr. Sift, you're already on screen, so why don't you go ahead? I believe you have 2 minutes. Please go ahead.
Hello, my name is Jason Sift, and I'm here to speak today on behalf of our Muskoka. First off, I'd like to take a moment to thank council, staff, and the planners for all of the work they have done so far on the official plan document. This has been a long process to undertake during a pandemic and a very busy few years at the township. Our Muskoka represents employers, local businesses, residents, and lakefront community. After reading all of the drafts of the official plan, each time we have felt very concerned. Since the first draft, there have been many improvements made, but there also seems to be new things added. We have watched many of both the planning and working committee meetings, and each time we leave happy that we seem to have made some progress, but also very frustrated that things seem to be continually discussed, but the change is not made in the draft that comes out months later. In every meeting we keep hearing, let's take it to the public. But then each time I wonder, how? How is the public, the taxpayers, to get involved in this process? The Engage Muskoka website has not been updated with documents or information on these meetings since last September. The only way we find the draft documents is by pulling them from the agenda package on the township website. Even if these documents are easy to find, how is the local resident or cottager to read and decipher over 200 pages and understand how this new plan is going to affect their properties into the future? We are very hopeful that soon the township will start to communicate how they will get the public involved and how they will ask for input in the absence of an in-person meeting. I have had firsthand experience that site plans are taking anywhere from 2 to 3 months to get approved. Building permits are taking as long as 5 to 6 weeks, but 2 weeks is what should be expected. We would like to know how the town plans to deal with a massive influx of applications due to the implications laid out in the official plan, when their staff are already very overwhelmed trying to tackle the huge amount of work that's already coming in. They are doing their best, but we're very concerned this will worsen the already existing backlog. Another concern after the initial review is the large focus on the waterfront and not much focus on addressing the urgent needs for affordable housing and addressing other local problems. Our Muskoka has retained Planscape to provide planning-related input and insight into the official plan. Planscape is currently going through the most recent draft and will be providing us with a detailed report in the future, which we are happy to provide to councillors and committee members. Thank you for your time to speak today. We look forward to making some meaningful progress on this new plan that will shape the future of Muskoka for generations to come.
Thank you, Mr. Sift, and I appreciate your brevity in your presentation. Ms. Walton?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair Bridgman. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yep,
we can.
okay,
So
thank you.
please go ahead.
Thank you for your opportunity to speak. I am Margaret Walton, registered professional planner and senior associate at Planscape. As Jason indicated, Planscape has been retained to assist our Muskoka, an organization of local residents, employers, business operators, and waterfront property owners to assist in monitoring and providing input on the update of your official plan. In addition to the waterfront policies, our Muskoka is interested in the impact of the proposed policies on the entire township and how the plan will address local problems, including access to housing, support for year-round businesses, job opportunities for local residents, and support for community facilities and services. We are preparing a detailed response to the current draft and look forward to participating in your public consultation process. I have a few comments to make based on our initial overview of the draft. The draft is long, complicated, and even for me as a professional planner, difficult to interpret or understand how it will be implemented. There are many new controls proposed. However, it is unclear if, when, or how the proposed expanded controls will be implemented. If they are mandatory for all development, as the wording implies, they will remove significant development rights and could complicate and extend the approval process, trigger the requirement to retain consultants, and add thousands of dollars of cost to even very simple applications. Only the very rich will be able to afford Muskoka Lakes. The draft is confusing with inconsistent references to types of development. Respectfully, it is my opinion that this plan proposes a business as usual approach, with the only change being increased complexity. In this day of climate change, evolving lifestyles, and increasingly limited access to property, especially lakefront property, can we not find a better way of doing things? We need to be innovative and forward-thinking, and there are ways to do this. We need policies that are accessible to your ratepayers and equitable. We look forward to working with you to develop progressive, effective policies that will protect what we all love about Muskoka while respecting the interests of all who have a stake in Muskoka Lakes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Walton. And I assume that when you get that report together, you'll be sending it to all the councillors and planning staff?
We'll submit it to your planning staff, absolutely, and make some recommendations, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, I gather Director Pink would like to say a few words.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Thank you, Mr. Sift and Ms. Walton, for those comments. I certainly look forward to all submissions, certainly your submission on the draft. I just wanted to comment very quickly on Mr. Sift's references to a lack of ability to find the document and the lack of updates on the Engage Muskoka page. Obviously, at this point, Council has not agreed to circulate the draft. It's been discussed at a working committee level and now a planning committee level. So there's been a number of meetings through that process and a number of discussions. The hope is the recommendation on today's agenda is that the document be endorsed for circulation so that public input can commence. And certainly at that point, you will see updates on the Engage Muskoka page, as well as opportunities for the public to start providing their input over the upcoming few months. So hopefully that helps clarify.
Thank you, Mr. Pink. So, okay, thank you. So we will now move on to our internal, and thank you, Mr. Sift and Ms. Walton. And we're going to now move on to our internal discussion here, and I welcome Mr. McDonald and Mr. Dyment.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. So for our public listening in, this is the second draft that we are going to discuss today. We may be tweaking a few things. I know there are a few topics that we want to bring back to talk about. And I believe this is still going to be called the second draft. Am I correct on that?
Yes, we can call it the second draft. Yes.
Okay. Just making sure, because we have that chart in there that sort of says second and third. So, okay. So I think then I know for myself, there's a couple of, there's 2 or 3 areas that I know we are going to want to open up again. I think I'm going to let Director Pink summarize that. But before I get to that, Director Pink, I would like Councillor Roberts, who chaired our working group, just to give us a brief overview of the group so that we all have that. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, as many are aware, and most are aware, that the township formed an official plan review working committee comprised of 6 public members and 3 township councillors to scrutinize the first draft. And subsequently the first draft of the second draft, if that's. Anyways, I'm pleased to report that there was very fruitful conversation with the working committee, where all sides were considered, and there was some compromise in position that was brought forward. A consensus was not achieved on everything, but was on the majority of topics. But unfortunately, there was not full consensus on everything. The second draft that we have in front of you right now includes those majority views, these will be under consideration today. I did receive from the official review working committee members individually their final comments on the second draft, which I'm going to package together and send off to Director Pink and Mr. McDonald for their consideration. So again, a big thank you to the working committee. Lots of time was spent here, lots of personal time and thought and going back and forth. So they did a really great job, and I was very pleased to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. So Director Pink, would you like to say a few words, maybe just in terms of process, so everybody understands that?
Thank you. Certainly, I don't have too much to add. Thank you, Councillor Roberts, for providing that background of the working committee. Just to provide a very quick background, I think we still call it draft 2, but it's version 2. There may be version 3 and 4, but it's still draft 2 for the time being. It was discussed at length, a number of meetings. I don't have the months off the top of my head, but I'm sure planning committee members recall the joint meetings we had. I think it was 5 or 6 of them. The direction, the outcome of that was that a further version of draft 2 be produced and discussed amongst the working committee. We just heard that background from committee member or the chair of that committee, Chair Roberts. Appreciate all the input those volunteers provided. There was some excellent discussion. And as Member Roberts indicated, as typical with these processes, certainly consensus is not able to be reached on every item, but there was certainly a lot of thoughtful input that helped the consulting team and staff prepare the version that's before you now. I can speak to next steps perhaps later in the meeting, but the intention or the hope after Mr. McDonald gives a brief overview of some of the more notable changes since the last time this document was before you. We can certainly go through that document and answer any questions or comments you may have on certain sections. And then hopefully after that, there is a resolution and a recommendation before you that requests a few items, in particular that this draft be endorsed for circulation. I would note this is not the statutory public meeting. If you refer back to the original work plan, staff really stressed the opportunity for the public to be engaged in input into this process. And I've prepared a flow chart in the staff report where the next step would be a less formal engagement with the public, likely an online survey and a digital open house with the consulting team and I. We will come back with those comments to committee, and that's the recommendation before we even consider draft 3 and a statutory public meeting. The other request, just for in respect to efficiencies, the recommendation is that committee consider, council ultimately consider delegating authority to planning committee to make all decisions on this process, save for final adoption. That will just save us the monthly wait in between meetings before the consulting team and staff can take certain next steps. So without further ado, I ask Mr. McDonald to provide a brief overview of some of the more notable changes to version 2 that since the last time committee members have seen the document. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Bridgman, and thank you very much, Mr. Pink, for that brief introduction. I actually did count up all the meetings, and there were quite a few, starting on March 29th, April 1st, April 6th, April 16th, April 26th, June 23rd, and July 6th. So that's 6 meetings in total that we've had to talk about this OP. So the draft version that's attached to this agenda package is basically, there are 2 things there. One is a track changes version that shows all changes made prior to all of our meetings. So I haven't done a track of all of the internal iterations of this document. That would be way too confusing. No one would understand it. So it's a complete track of first version to the second version, if I can call it that. And then I've also produced a track changes accepted version as well. I do apologize for there being some table of content issues. I did correct it, but even after that, I did find a couple of gremlins. So for sure, it will be correct when it does go out. So in preparing this draft, we did go through as a team the entire document, and we strengthened the language wherever we possibly could. So we changed mays to shalls, we did shoulds to shalls, we changed encouraged to require wherever we could, discouraged to prohibit, for example. And again, we did that wherever we thought it was appropriate to do so. but it's not appropriate to do so in all cases, primarily because the more rigid you make the official plan, the less flexible it becomes. And it's certainly something for Planning Committee to be mindful of when considering the final version down the road. Anyways, I'll leave that point there. In terms of some of the main things that are in this draft, there was also a general cleaning up of the schedules that are also associated with this as well. Those changes were made by the District of Muskoka staff under our direction. We included an updated section on climate change in section B7. That was a specific request. There was a specific request made to enhance those policies. We did a best practices review of what other plans say on climate change. We looked at Huntsville, which we were directed to do as well. And we've taken what we think is the best of the best and incorporated it within a section that is closer to the front of the official plan. We've also included a new section on net gain in section D1.5. That's on page 40. Basically, it's intended to raise the bar. And in addition to demonstrating no negative impact, we'll be asking folks to look at how the environment can actually be enhanced as a consequence of a development approval and through either conditions of approval or through monitoring. We also updated the watershed planning section as well based on direction given. That's on page 46. Certainly greater support for integrated watershed planning within the document. There was quite a bit of talk through the meetings about permitting more than one sleeping cabin on a property. In the end, there was direction given to not change the current approach in the township. So that has been reflected in the existing official plan. Causation studies and water quality studies. There is something in the draft where I've highlighted a concern that I had about eliminating a requirement to amend the official plan to add additional water quality indicators. I should note, I'm not in support of removing that requirement. However, I do note that the district official plan actually requires an amendment to add additional water quality indicators. So I'm content to say no official plan locally, keeping in mind that there would be an official plan amendment required at the district level to add water quality indicators. I'm happy to answer any questions on that as we go forward. In terms of regulations based on lake category, instead of including an appendix to the official plan identifying which lakes are in what category, we actually included it within a table and inserted it right in the official plan, so it's clear in terms of what lakes are in what category. There were a couple of lakes that need to be added. They include Mud Lake and Lambert's Lake. They were identified later on. They both have areas greater than 8 hectares, so they will be included as category 3 lakes. There were quite a few emails on that going around in the last little while. Lot coverage and site alteration, we did add some additional thinking into that section. We made it very clear that lot coverage applies to buildings and structures. And we've included new amenity area coverage standards as well. There is a new table in the document that sets out what those standards are. We've also defined what amenity area is. I'm assuming there will be some discussion on that today. Basically for category 1, it's 3%. Category 2, it's 2%. Category 3, it's 1%. We've also included a cap on the size of amenity areas at 500 square meters. We've done quite a bit of math on this. Of course, not all of it has been shared with you because it is quite complex, but we do have a fairly good handle on what would be permitted on individual properties based on the amenity area coverages we've developed. We've also taken into account in developing these numbers, how large a tennis court is, how large a double-sized court is, how large a pickleball court is, and so on in developing these numbers. We did not include driveways, septic systems, paths and pathways, and stairs accessing the lake in the amenity area coverage calculation because those are required on every property and are unique to every property and are also necessary on every property. So it's something that would be dealt with through a site plan, but not subject to the amenity area control. So we can certainly go through the math when we get to that point. We've also included a overall cap on the amount of a lot that can be altered at 75%. That's section E4.7. So basically, we've got a lot coverage of 10%. We've got an amenity area coverage of 3%. That leaves about 12% for septic, driveway, pathways, and stairs. So essentially, we're developing what we think is a pretty good standard for what we're expecting going forward on every lot in the waterfront area. Water excess lots, I understand there's certainly a concern about this policy. We did look at other municipalities, most notably Lake of Bays and Georgian Bay Township, and we have developed what we call Mainland waterfront landing policies, which are somewhat similar to what you have right now. But if someone wishes to rent their property for 3 or more island residents, if I can call it that, they would require rezoning. If they're looking to rent to only 2 or less, then that would be an as of right permission in the zoning bylaw and would be included within the waterfront zone as a permission. Lake plan section, there was quite a bit of back and forth between Mr. Dyment and the lake associations on the lake planning section. Many changes were made to those policies to recognize what was desired. I think we've got it right now. I should note that there may be things the lake associations were looking for in those sections that we did not include because they're already covered off in other parts of the plan. So for example, maximum dwelling unit size is already a general policy. We're not going to repeat it over and over again in each lake plan section unless it's less than the maximum that is permitted everywhere else. Flood hazards, we've also updated that section. There was a direction given to how are we going to deal with replacements and expansions within floodplain areas, particularly for boathouses and other development that may be there. We've included some wording in that section that basically says that is a zoning bylaw issue. It's not an official plan issue, but it's something the zoning bylaw will have to tackle when we get to that point. Commercial accommodation, many changes and many discussions have been held on this section. I'm not going to go through it now, but I'm happy to take questions. Generally speaking, there is a general strengthening of the policies to require these uses to be commercial in nature. There is a strong discouragement to development by way of plan of condominium. Essentially, that would only occur by way of exception and through an official plan amendment process. One of the notable changes is that if anyone is proposing a new resort, they will also have to justify the need for that resort based on an assessment of what is needed in the local economy and beyond for the types of units that are proposed. So I'm happy to talk about that further. I can say based on all of the discussions that have been held that the policies are very restrictive and it will be very difficult with these policies in place for new resorts to make it through the gauntlet that we've set through these policies. And quite frankly, that's the direction we've been, that I've got from the committee and the working group. And I think I've implemented that direction to the best of my abilities. Aggregate section, we did make it very clear that new operations are not permitted within 2 kilometers of the waterfront area and urban centers. We did make some other changes to that section to reflect some of the good policies that are in the existing official plan. Again, this was as directed. I would note that by not permitting aggregates within 2 kilometers of waterfront and urban centers, it basically means if someone wishes to develop within those distances, they would require an official plan amendment and then go through whatever process they need to go through. With respect to lot creation on private roads, we clarified that section to make it clear that if new lots are proposed, there would be a need to go through a site plan agreement process where certain acknowledgements would be agreed to by the proponent in terms of there being no services provided and so on. That's something that was requested by Mr. Pink. So that's a very brief overview. Of course, I've not gone through all of the changes that we've made through this document, but I wanted to give you a very high level understanding of what we've done. So that's it, Chair Bridgman, for me. Happy to take any questions and comments. I'm very hopeful after today that we can move forward and release this version to the public. I would like to stress, as I have in every other meeting, that there will continue to be multiple opportunities for changes and updating as we go through this process. But I think it's about time that we do go out to the public, and I hope that's the consensus of this committee today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Excuse me, as our delegate said, we'd like to have public input, official public input soon. So, okay, so I am going to suggest, I know I had two, and one was the water access properties. And that is one area that we had said there had to be deeded access. And then we reversed that. I believe that that is something that is up for discussion again today based on our recent meetings, etc. So that is one that I would like to bring back. And I believe the main floor of boat houses, not that there's a final decision today, but I think if we could get a little more direction before we head out to the public, that would be helpful. So those are two that I am interested in having a discussion on. And I see Councillor Jaglowitz, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I think a lot of good work has been done on this, but I do have a number of questions that I'd like to raise before it goes out to the public. Is this the appropriate time for me to do that? Some of them include yours, but may I proceed? I have 7 or 8 points.
Well, why don't we, if they're the same as mine, why don't we take these topics one by one? How does that sound to you?
Only one of yours overlaps mine, so we can take them any order you want. I'm flexible.
Well, why don't you give us your thoughts, and I'll ask Mr. Pink to write them down, and he can sort of control where we're going with what.
Okay, thank you. Then my first one was the one you mentioned on water access properties, and I believe there's been a lot of good work in trying to tighten it up. But what I do see missing is no definition of long term. In other words, doesn't indicate what long term is, and it doesn't get into quantities. One boat slip and one parking spot's probably not adequate anymore. So I just think I agree with you. I think that area needs to be discussed and tightened up a bit. My next area is section F342A, which deals with on-site amenities. And unfortunately, it has a phrase in there, shared close proximity. So F is the commercial resort area. So it's allowing the amenities to be shared and within close proximity. And I don't think that's the intention. I think the amenities probably should be on site. However, this may be something that has to be dealt with in zoning. If you leave the shared close proximity in there, then that means that's the bar, that you only have to meet that bar. So I think it's not appropriate to have that phrase in there. When we move on to on-site management, which is F3.4.2.6, once again, it hedges. It said, shall be provided, and I'm quoting, or on a neighboring property or reasonable driving distance. Once again, I think on-site management should be on-site. And if you want an exception, maybe it's done in zoning, but not in the OP. Should be on-site management. The next item deals with the uses permitted in a commercial resort. And F3.2, I believe, there should be a phrase added there. It cannot be a primary or secondary residence of an individual. That statement, I believe, is important, that it's not meant to be a residence of any type. F3.2C talks about things that happen within an urban area. And I'm just curious what an urban area is. Is it defined? My definition of an urban area is Port Carling or Bella, but I think it shouldn't be left loose. An urban area should be defined. And then when we go down to F35C, it talks about, and I may have this mixed up. I think I'll pull this out and come back to it because this may have been fixed up, but basically it was that private communal services should be allowed and should be the preferred method of servicing a commercial resort that's not a condominium. But I'll come back to that because I actually didn't look at, I thought I looked at the draft, but I may have to come back. When we get to F2C, once again, that's very troublesome because it says support the development of single owner commercial accommodation uses and discourage the development of commercial accommodation uses by way of condominium outside the urban centers, which should be defined. And then it says, and the resort village of Manette. Well, there's a whole section on the resort village of Manette that's not being discussed at this time. And for some reason, in the OP General, we authorize the development of commercial accommodation uses by way of condominium in the resort village of Manette and treat it like an urban center. But we haven't even dealt with Manette yet. So I would suggest that's not appropriate in this section. So if you weren't able to write those down enough, I'm happy to provide something on it. But I'd just like to come back on that one, which I maybe haven't expressed properly. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to group that all under commercial resorts for a lot of that, Councillor Jagowitz. Okay, so I guess I see Councillor Roberts' hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through you, just 2 quick points, or one probably big point, one small, very small point. I'd like to have a wholesome discussion on the purpose of the objective sections. I raised this a few months ago. Objectives are something that is a goal. And I think that when I read the objectives specifically, simply in the aggregate section, everything listed in the objectives is covered off in the other sections of that, other subsections. So it's redundant. And I think that I'd like to have a wholesome conversation whether we remove objectives from the whole report. And then my other very small point is just a small oversight on in K1 is that the order, if we keep objectives in, is the order, and we've talked before. So when we get to that point, I'll bring up that very small oversight. Thank you.
Well, when you say when we get to that point, we are not going through this section by section. We're only doing this by what somebody asked, because this is still at the point where we need public input before we really start to refine this. Okay. So that if you want K1, I think we've got that written down, Councillor Roberts.
Okay, that's all I want. Just a quick one on K1.
Okay, Councillor Hayes.
Okay, through you, as Councillor Roberts indicated, not everything was agreed upon by the working committee. One of the things was the recreational carrying capacity. Many of us felt that that should be a tool in the toolbox and not the only tool that we used. By using just the one single recreational carrying capacity, we have in essence frozen 51 lakes from development. And knowing some of these lakes, they could certainly handle development because of the current uses that are on them. So the onus is put on the lake owners to justify why RCC is on them, rather than having a fulsome look and have RCC be part of the tools that we look at when we look at freezing development on lakes. So I would like to know what council's thoughts are on that.
Okay, thank you. I would also would like to know what the public's thoughts are on that too. I think that'll be helpful. Mayor Harding.
Thank you. I'm not sure why I didn't pick up on this before, but unless it changed. On page 53, E1G, it's about lower levels and being built, and I agree with the first statement, should be complement natural built form, architectural design, soften the appearance. But it seems a little backwards to me, and I'm not sure why, that the lower level or the basement floor is actually smaller than the upper level. I'm not sure if we've intended that or not. I mean, to me, if I've got a full basement across, I'm not adding a footprint, I'm not doing anything else. I'm not sure if it's an upside down wedding cake or what exactly we're doing with it. Just a question, is that what we're intending or not? So I'll leave that open because I'm not sure how you would build a small level on the basement floor and a bigger level above.
I believe that's in our current plan, actually, Mayor Harding. I think it's encouraged, not definite. So, okay.
This becomes a shall in this
Shall.
particular case. So as we've amended, I just, I asked the question.
Well, my answer to that would be 7,500 square feet counts all levels, whether they're finished or not. That would be my update to that. But anyway, okay. So can we start through this then on a one-on-one basis? And the first one is water access properties. So it has been tightened up somewhat, but I am wondering what committee thinks about going back to saying there has to be access, there has to be, what's the term I'm looking for? Deemed access. And it has to be, it can't be a marina saying, yes, this is what we want. So anybody have any comments on that? Councillor Hayes.
Most of the marinas in the area count on parking revenue as part of their actual business plan. And to take that away from them would certainly make a big ding in what their bottom line of profit is. But I think that we have to make it clear that owners, businesses, and visitors have to secure non-public access to their property. And I think that if we can find some way of making that very clear, that I don't care whether they purchase parking spaces at a marina, which is normal and used on an everyday basis, or whether they do it privately or whether they have a landing, I don't care. I just don't want them parking on the roads. And that's something that I think we can make clear in the language by changing it a little bit.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Harding.
Thank you. I guess my one comment, I said this before, that if we are going to make a provision that I have to have deeded waterfront access, we need a corresponding provision within the official plan that we are encouraging the redevelopment of waterfront properties to waterfront landings, because we can't create one problem without solving another problem.
Okay, so I'm going to ask committee here. So what we've got basically is it has to be deeded access. That would be one option that we put out for public input. Or the other would be, as Councillor Hayes said, to make it quite clear that the municipality is not involved at all in finding parking spaces for island property, and word it appropriately. I believe that's what you were basically saying, Councillor Hayes. So on the first one, who is in favor? Oh, sorry, Councillor Jaglowitz, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to offer a suggestion. The word deeded is difficult, and that's why I raised the term long-term. If we defined what long-term meant, what do we mean? Does it have to be a 20-year contract? Like, I don't think it necessarily has to be deeded. I think what we're looking for is one permanent boat slip. And then don't you need a number of parking spots depending on the size of the, like it's a one parking spot, one boat slip's not adequate anymore. So I'm not as hung up on the word deeded as I am on it that it's permanent or long-term or something like that. And the way you read what's in there now, it mixes parking and waterfront. It seems to indicate it doesn't really define either one, in my opinion. Anyway. So, what is that we're after? We're after, so they, as Councillor Hayes said, so they don't park on the street. But
Right.
as soon as the son-in-law comes up with his boat, he's got to have two spots, one for his car and one for his trailer, right? So I don't know. So, anyway.
Okay, so I'm thinking is that the number of parking spots, would that be better directed through our zoning bylaw, I think, rather than in the official plan, Mr. McDonald? Would you comment?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that level of detail is certainly better in a zoning bylaw. I think this discussion is about whether deeded access is a yes or a no. It's really that simple. Through the initial process, we recommended that be considered. Through discussions subsequent to that, we were directed to remove that requirement. I know Jim, Mr. Dyment has his hand up and he'll add to this. My thinking is that deeded access is very challenging in my view. That means you have to negotiate something with a property owner and register something on title, which is permanent. That's how you get the permanent, I guess, control over that. We did look at other municipalities, and one perhaps simpler way of dealing with that is to allow anyone to rent up to 2 slips on their property for island residents, and it's not something the township gets involved in. Standards get developed in a zoning bylaw on how many parking spaces you require, and it just happens on its own. If somebody wants any more than that, they have to come to council and make an application. So there are 2 very different paths that you can choose, and certainly a lot at stake. Mr. Dyment, did you want to add to that?
Mr. Dyment?
Yes, just a couple of things. Madam Chair, you raised a good point about the issue, and as well as Councillor Hayes, about parking on public land. And I think that there's 2 issues here that need to be addressed. One is a clear statement in the official plan that the municipality will not provide mainland parking for water access properties. And that's important because it's a public work providing mainland parking, and the Planning Act prohibits municipalities from undertaking public works that don't comply with their official plan. So that I think that would help council dealing with pressures for residents saying it's the municipality's problem and you have to deal with it. And I think that would be a good addition to your official plan as well. The only other thing I will say is, if you are on Lake Rosso and Lake Joe at the north end, on the border between Muskoka Lakes and Seguin Township, new lots in Seguin Township have to provide deeded access, but new lots in Muskoka Lakes don't. If you're on Skeleton Lake and you're the west end of Skeleton Lake in Muskoka Lakes, or the east end in Huntsville, new lots have to provide deeded access, but in Muskoka Lakes they don't. So I'll just add those comments to you.
Okay, so well, I certainly liked your part about we'll put in the official plan that we're not providing parking through the municipality. Do I have agreement on that? Yes. Okay, so we're doing that for sure, Mr. Dyment, and then we have some comments coming in. Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. And through you, I guess if I have a concern, it's the whole notion that we've been talking and obviously about the whole parking in Marina Road and Walker's Point and Bull Morris. Clearly, this is a powder keg issue. And we have been telling our voting tax-paying public that we are the township going to embark on a massive 2022 transportation master plan that's going to address many issues, notwithstanding some of what we're talking about now. How do our consultants see us meshing these 2 things together? I'm concerned that we're we don't even have a master plan for transportation, which is going to involve and engage. And I'm not saying it's going to provide some solutions, but here we are about to put our hands up and say the township does not provide parking to island properties, and yet we do. I can see 12 right now, and they're all around the lake. So I think we should be careful what we're voting on. This is huge.
I believe it's just new lot creations, Councillor Zabitz, that this would apply to, but I could be wrong. Mr. Dyment or Mr. McDonald?
No, you're correct, Chair Bridgman. This is a forward-looking policy. What exists, whether it's legal or not is a whole other discussion. That's not for today. But if someone applies for a new lot after this plan gets approved with the requirement for deeded access, they would have to prove deeded access. So think about it as a forward-looking change in your approach to how to deal with this particular issue. And as Mr. Dyment indicated, if you do that, you would be operating in a manner that's consistent with the surrounding municipalities.
Mr. Pink would like to say something. Mr. Pink?
Through you. I think Member Zabitz raises a good point. I don't know if the sort of a blanket statement that we're not going to provide mainland parking might tie our hands a little bit if perhaps there are future initiatives to build a municipal parking lot to do just that. I think what I am hearing from committee is the concern with providing parking on streets. So perhaps that statement could be a little more focused and I think there is language already in the OP to that effect, but perhaps it could be strengthened somewhat just to make it abundantly clear that whether it's lot creation or any existing development, township streets are not to be utilized for public parking for access to water access properties.
Okay, thank you. Does that work for you, Councillor Hayes? Okay. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, and through you, I support what Mr. Pink just suggested. The one thing I'm a little bit curious about, it's a question, and maybe I missed it, but the definition of deeded access. My understanding was that it was everything from ownership rights to condominiumized parking to deeded right-of-way to an easement, for instance, that gives you access to a place to park a car or a boat or a boat trailer. But from the discussion, I either missed the definition or I'm not on the same page. I mean, from the discussion, it's not necessarily an ownership interest in a piece of mainland property, is it? It can be broader than that.
It could be an easement.
Yeah. Okay.
The key part of it is that it would run with the land for more than 21 years. So basically anything that runs with the land for greater than a period of time requires some type of approval through your committee of adjustment. So that's what deeded access is. Anything less than that would not be deeded access.
Okay, that's good.
Councillor Hayes.
Yes, through you. I would think that deeded access would be something very difficult for landowners to give up, being that if you give deeded access to a small family that has one car and they sell their cottage, the deeded access goes with the land, and then you have a family that has 15 cars show up and want to park on your property. That's not fair. The agreement has to be with the person that has it. And if that can't be, I don't think it has to be deeded access. I think that ties the property owner down too much, and people would not get involved with actually allowing that on their property, because if they sell their property, that goes with the property. I'm sorry, here's my property. It's a nice cottage, but I have 11 cottagers parking on it. So, and I might not have 11 properties. I might have just 2, but there might be 11 cars. So I think that a deeded access would be very difficult. That I would probably go with an agreement that runs between owners, not deeded access for 21 years that goes with properties.
So can you fill us in on what Seguin and Lake of Bass, how they deal with that, Mr. Dyment?
Sure. It's required as an easement. So think of it in that process where they have to make an application to the Committee of Adjustment to grant an easement for a right rights on a parcel of land. And those rights are typically a couple of parking spaces and a pathway down to a dock. Councillor Hayes, to respond to your question, the size of the easement determines how many cars can park on it. It's not a blanket easement over the entire property. You would actually have a survey, and it would be a part on plan that's defined on the title that is the easement. And that's what Huntsville and Seguin do. Lake of Bays, interestingly, allow up to 3 landings on a private property, but there's no deed to it. So.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I'm just always, you know, we've sort of only heard or talked about Walker's Point and Beaumaris, but in fact, there's been a long standing problem at Footsbay. I'll just say that. There's other areas that we should be discussing. And I don't want it to think that it was just because of those 2 sites. But mostly, I've also seen very successfully over the last 15 years, actually, of where islanders have gotten together and they've purchased these sites, these deeded access, and those are working really well. And I commend them for that, because in fact, I'll just say in the case of East Bay Marina, that goes with the property. So when you buy one of those properties, that spot goes with that site. You may not ever do any other services from that site, but that's where your dock and your landing is, and the agreement that you already have. And I've seen others do, you know, we've seen other locations purchased up. Again, dealing with, I'll just say Bala Park Island is one of the sites. I don't have a problem with requiring the deeded access, because this is going forward. There's only so many more spots we can create. I mean, in reality, we should be looking at that in a bigger picture. Sorry. Sorry about that. But I mean, we can look at it in a bigger picture, but we are just looking at the newer lots being developed. And as I said, I don't see that we have hundreds coming on. And if I do, I'm really concerned. But again, I think that we could put that in place. I don't know that we need to discount what other municipalities have done. Clearly, we haven't been doing as well as we should have been. You know, the last time that I actually recall that we dealt with creating parking for islanders was when we did the Whiting's Beach location. And I was really pleased the other day when I was down there that the parking lot's full, which means that, to me, the message is getting out there that whether it is our signage or not from the Bala signs, I guess, directing people to go elsewhere, that parking lot's full. But again, it is a requirement of that property owner. If I choose to buy a property, I need to know all of the things that come with that and the restraints. There's no way that you can, well, I shouldn't say that. You could actually ask if contractors could register with the building department saying that they're going to use such and such road, which in fact, I think we should be doing more often, especially when we have large pieces of equipment that are coming into some of these small sites, that in fact, the municipality does know that site might be a challenge or that location is going to be temporarily a problem. But I don't want to go away from a deeded access for sure. I think, as again, I'm trying not to deal with the issues in the past, but moving forward. And I think that's our best answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. Through you to, I suppose, either Nick or Jim. You've mentioned the other townships in particular you've used as a test, I suppose, to model our recommendation here. Are those, do those townships, have they been subject to appeal? Is this an appealable? Is the deeded access piece, is it highly contentious? Is it appealable? I suppose everything can be at some point in time, but if I come forward and I have some other solution besides the mainland deeded access, is that considered over in Seguin and Lake of Bays?
I'll answer that. I have done one hearing for Seguin Township on a proposed landing and lot creation where the landing is just not appropriate that they were proposing, and the township was successful in not approving the landing because it was not located in a proper location for safety and peace and quiet of the adjacent properties.
Okay, so I think what we have here, going to try and keep this moving, is do we require deeded access or do we not? I think that's the simple thing that is all that Mr. McDonald and Mr. Dyment need right now. All right, so those in favor of deeded access, raise your hands. 2, 3, 4, 5. You have that, Madam Clerk? Those opposed? 1, I think. All right. Sorry? Oh, 2. Thank you, Councillor Hayes. Okay, so that is, there's your direction. Mayor Harding?
Thank you. I said it before, if we're going to implement this, could we contemplate a corresponding encouragement of a waterfront landing or change official plan policy as well? Because I think that if we are going to implement that, we need to be able to encourage that for those people who need waterfront landings. So I'd like to see that.
I agree. Mr. McDonald, that possible?
Yeah, so through you, Chair Bridgman. So currently we already have waterfront landing policies in here that are fairly similar to what you already have in your official plan, in your existing official plan, I mean. So other than making it clear that we encourage these things, I'm not sure how much else there is to do because a waterfront landing requires a rezoning. And each one of those would need to be looked at on a case-by-case basis, and quite frankly, some of them may not be appropriate. So we can look at strengthening the encouragement part, but there's still a need to go through a process for each one of them.
I think that works. Okay, thank you. All right, what was next on our list, Mr. Pink? Oh, resort. Let's do the resort now. I'm not sure if some of this might be for the next draft after we get in public feedback. Where are you, Councillor Jagowitz? There you are. So can I ask you, let's go one by one through this with you.
Okay, thank you. The first one I mentioned was F342A, and I wanted to delete the words shared or close proximity. In other words, the amenity should be on the property. As simple as that. As soon as you put in the OP shared or close proximity, that means I don't have to be on the property.
Okay. All right. So I'm not sure we need discussion on that. That's again, either a yes or a no. So I actually agree with you. I don't think it should be shared, but that's my humble opinion. So those who would like to remove the shared from this draft, I see your hands raised. That I see Mayor Harding wants to speak.
Thank you. Just a question. So, you know, the removal of the word shared, depending on how a property is developed, if it's under similar ownership, is it all under one? If there's different aspects of the property, the original Red Leaves development had, you know, a center check-in area that would service one hotel here for those people who've been to any intra-west resort. Multiple ownership, you check in at a central check-in place, and you may have to travel a kilometer to get to your lodging after you go into that central check-in place. So I just want to make sure that we, not having to create 14 check-in places on a larger development along the way. And I know what we're all trying to do in this particular case. I think the properties, should be adjacent to one another. And I think that's one of the issues, that they weren't adjacent in the issue, but just want to make sure that we capture everything and allow some flexibility.
So I think what I'm hearing from you is not check-ins shared, but I think we're talking about physical, like beaches, like whatever. I believe that's what you're talking about, Councillor Jaglowitz.
I'm talking about, I'm talking about amenities.
The
And
amenities,
that's
right.
a swimming pool or a restaurant. And I didn't just mention shared, I mentioned shared and close proximity. To make it clear, there have to be amenities on the property. There can be amenities nearby and shared, but this property has to have some amenities. Can't be a residential subdivision.
Got it. Councillor Hayes.
Thank you. I think I was thinking along the same lines of Councillor Jaglowitz, where if two resorts were side by each, one might have a huge swimming pool and the other one might have a huge restaurant. And those could be shared, but there should be amenities on every resort property of some description. And then if they choose to share with their neighbors, that's up to them, but there is something to anchor people to that place.
So I don't believe we put shared in the official plan then. That would be a private between those two properties afterwards. We need amenities on each property. Councillor Jaglowitz, right?
Yes, shared. We take out the word shared close proximity.
Okay, so who is in agreement with Councillor Jaglowitz's suggestion? I believe we have everybody on that one, Madam Clerk. Okay, thank you. The next one then, Councillor Jaglowitz.
The next one is F3426, which is on-site management. Once again, it states, or on a neighboring property or reasonable driving distance. I have some flexibility if the neighboring properties are the same ownership, but I don't know what's a reasonable driving distance. Like, so I understand the mayor's comment that I think it should be clear there should be on-site management. Maybe I'm looking for help here. Do others have thinking on this? This is one that a lot of people think is very important.
Yeah, Mr. McDonald?
Yeah, so the section we're talking about is F342B, so it's right after the one we just talked about. Again, this is all about flexibility. Some of these policies are flexible because there are many context-specific factors to think about whenever these types of applications come in. And I guess what you're suggesting here is, again, a yes/no. Should every individual resort property have its own on-site management? Yes, no. I mean, that's the direction I guess I'm looking for. And if I can get that direction, I will work with that.
Just one other comment, that check-in is one thing, but I think the people that want on-site management mean that at 11 o'clock at night, when there's a disturbance on the property, there's someone there to deal with it. And so it's more than just check-in.
Yeah, and I think we need to remember, again, this is going forward, right? This will not apply to current resorts, but it's any going forward. Okay, this is a simple yes, no. Yes, oh, sorry, Councillor Nishikawa, please go ahead.
Sorry, I guess it's not so simple, yes, no, for me, because the same thing, it's the answer of where these are located. So for instance, if the manager is in Bala, managing the resort in Manette, how is that close if there's a challenge? So otherwise, then I would say that every ownership needs a resort manager on that site. Thank you.
Well, I believe that's what we were, I think that's what we were That's what we're voting on. So just to clarify it. So all those in favor of on-site management? Okay, there you go, Mr. McDonald. Okay, Councillor Jaglowitz, next.
Next item is F32, and that deals with uses permitted in a commercial resort, and it does list them. And what I'm asking for is that make it clear there be a statement that it not be a person's primary or secondary residence. In other words, there's all those uses, but it's clear it's not to be used as a residence.
Okay, that's a simple yes, no again. I understand why you're saying that, Councillor Kelly.
The not so simple part is determining when something is a residence, I think. And because I agree with Councillor Jagowitz's comment, I just have no idea how to determine when something becomes a residence. I think it's circumstantial, and I think you've got to build rules that prohibit the thing from being interpreted in any way as a residence. Common furniture, pools, and so forth. I don't think there's a test. I don't think even Revenue Canada knows the test. And they're the ones who use it.
So maybe we say that you cannot have 12-month usage. It can't be used 12 months of the year as your home. Forget principal residence, because that's...
I think elsewhere we're defining residence, aren't we? Because we're talking about, oh no, that's in the Manette section. I apologize. Well, maybe I should ask the question, is that term defined somewhere?
I think in this, through you, Chair Bridgman, I think in this context, the occupancy controls and the requirement to be in a rental pool and the furniture fixtures program and all of that other stuff is already in here, which I think gets at that particular issue. I'm okay putting it in here, but I just don't think it's enforceable. I don't think you can make somebody prove that it's not their primary residence. What kind of documentation would that be? So I'm not a big fan of putting things in here that you can't enforce. So I think we've got a lot of other ways to make it clear that someone cannot occupy that unit for 12 months. And those are very clear policies at this point. Having said that, I'm fine putting it in, but just keep in mind, it's just not going to do anything for you.
Okay, Councillor Hayes.
Yes, through you. To me, a primary residence is the address that you put on your driver's license. That says this is the place where I am the most. And by saying that you cannot make the rental units a primary residence, it means that they have to have someplace else to put on their driver's license as their primary residence. And I think that is stating emphatically that this is not your home because your license has your address for your home. And so I would agree with Councillor Jagowitz. I don't think it's enforceable, but I think it should be stated.
And I also added both permanent and permanent or primary or secondary. It's not meant to be your cottage either. That's my understanding of a commercial unit is not meant to be your cottage.
Okay, I'm guess maybe I'm looking for direction here. I think Councillor Hayes with you cannot put, I don't know how you enforce that either, Councillor Hayes.
I don't think the enforceability is important. I think it'll be a statement to.
It's just a statement. Well, if we all. Sorry. Okay. Would we all like that statement put in, and is it tied to your driver's license? I don't know.
I wouldn't put a driver's license in there to be frank, but I'm okay putting a statement in there that these are not intended to be used for permanent or seasonal use or something like that. That's fine because it speaks to the overall intent. I know guys who have 3 driver's licenses. I'll just give you the one you want.
I know. Yeah, it works for your insurance coverage too, doesn't it? So there you go. Okay, so are we good with a general statement that this is not to be used as a primary or seasonal residence? All in favor? Okay, we're good with that. Okay, all right, Councillor Jaglowitz, we must be getting through your list now.
We're getting there. F32C talks about within an urban center, and maybe I should ask the question: has an urban center been defined anywhere in this document?
A simple answer is yes. It's Port Carling and Bala.
Yeah,
and it's actually defined as such.
Yes.
Then that handles that one. Okay. Then we get down to the one I was stuttering around with, and it is F35C, and there's two sections that are at odds. One section says that a condominium or a commercial resort has to be by way of condominium, and the other one says it should not be. And Nick and Jim, do you understand what I'm saying there? Do I? In other words, F332 says, while the township's preferred form of tenure for resorts is single ownership. Okay, then it talks about that, but yet on F35C, F3, and again, I'm stumbling again because it's not F35C, it talks about 35C, it says, where private communal sewage services and private communal water service proposed, the proposal shall proceed by condominium description. So it's saying,
right, I think I can clear this up.
Saying recommending single owner. Pardon?
I think I can clear this up. So basically, we're discouraging planted condominiums. If one is proposed, it's by way of exception. They go through an official plan amendment process. If it is through a planted condominium process, private communal services would be considered, and they have to proceed by way of condominium description. The challenge is that private communal services are not that supported at the district level. So I think I've added to your confusion just now. I've been making so many changes to this section. I have not looked at this section, to be frank. Right. So I think there's a need for a little better coordination.
Yeah, I had a new set of eyes on it. I
see that.
Okay, so I don't think we have to vote on it. The intention was that we're just, is that okay? So you don't have to.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Well, then the next one is F2C, and I'm and it's where it says support the development of single owner commercial accommodation uses and discourage the development of commercial accommodation uses by plan of condominium outside of the urban centers, which is Bala and Port Carling, and the Manette Resort Village. And that resort village, that's the only place it's mentioned. That whole section we're not dealing with. And what we seem to have done is prejudged what that section is going to say, and says it can proceed by way of condominium.
So I think the simple answer is I'll take the Manette Resort Village out of this right now, because you're right. That's a separate discussion. So I'll take that out.
Thank you. You've handled mine. I have one general comment, but I'll wait till the end. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. So next on our list, I think it's main store or boathouses. And we hadn't landed on anything, and we won't land completely, obviously, till we get the public input back. But we had a fair amount of discussion. And so one of the things that I want to raise is, are we interested in ensuring that portion of the boathouse stays as boat slips or open water? And the suggestion is about 33% of it, so that there is an area where you could have a couch out of the sun, whatever. So that is, that's one part of it. The second part that I want to raise is the fact that we seem to be having full kitchens in these places on the main floor, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't think that's the intent of getting out of the sun with couches that you can move around, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be, I would like to see, this is my personal thing, and Mr. Pink, could you bring up that picture? Because I do recall when we were discussing this, that the term fish cleaning station was allowing people to put kitchens into their main level boathouses because it's a fishing related element. So having been a member of a fishing club, I know what a fish cleaning station looks like. And Mr. Pink is just going to bring up some pictures for you. So it's whether this group has an appetite to limit any kind of a kitchen or of a sink in a boat on the main floor of a boathouse to something like this, rather than the built-in granite kitchen, because, and it's cold water only, and it's open because all the guts go into the garbage underneath, et cetera, et cetera. So I just thought I'd throw that out for discussion, because I think if we're trying to move people away from living on the water, this would be part of it. So thank you, Mr. Pink. So do I have any comments on either one of those? The open water within a boathouse, and maybe we try to keep it to just some couches. Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I'm the complete opposite. I'm not trying to make room for couches. A boathouse is a boathouse to me. We have discussed this for many, many years at this township. And I thought we actually landed pretty good. It was just people just went way beyond what our bylaws had stated. So I agree that there needs to be a storage area. I don't know where the 33%, that percentage number scares me, quite honestly. So again, you know, I look at even the number of boathouses we have built, and with very willing property owners, that we need some storage down there, but really we just want to put away our stuff. We want our fridges elevated. If there is one fridge down there, that type of thing, to be away from the, but that's not anything. I mean, we're not talking, quite frankly, I have not come across, other than one property that complained twice because they were flooded, because their whole living area, and they chose to cover up all their slips. So I don't know where the 33% comes from, but I'm uncomfortable with that. I would just like to see a normal closeted area for storage, which is fine. And really, a boathouse is a boathouse. If you're allowed accommodations above that's under your size of your property and that sort of thing, that's what you get when you have, 300 feet of frontage. But I don't like the idea that we may be opening up an opportunity for even people with a single-story boathouse that would not normally be allowed any accommodation at a boathouse, to now have a bed down there, for instance, because they can take 33% and turn it into a bedroom. I have big concerns about that.
Okay, Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you, and through you, I think it's a slippery slope. I know we've discussed this time and time again over at least the last 2 years, time and time again. You see them now, and they're popping up more and more frequently. They're just the most gorgeous and ultra expensive things I've ever seen. I mean, it's 2 boat slips and then a living room covered, beautiful doors, etc. And so currently it's allowed. And again, I would go back to David. I recall asking David this question, if I might, a couple of years ago. If he's here, is he here? Again, what can we do about this to say 33% or 10% fishing or wakeboarding, supplies storage or canoe storage? How far down that road do we want to go? I think we're going to be wrestling with this for a long time.
Director Pink.
Thank you. Through you, just to make it abundantly clear for everyone, currently the zoning and the official plan for some time now makes it very clear it's not permitted, no habitable space permitted. What we've been experiencing for quite a few years now is what you've identified, Member Zavitz. A number of property owners, maybe to back up, sorry, even a little bit further, this issue has been identified decades ago. My predecessor undertook an interim control bylaw exercise to try to address it. And what we came up with was a zoning bylaw provision that required only one room in the first story of a boathouse, thinking that would address it. What we've now simply seen are very extravagant one-room lower levels of boathouses. So they're always one step ahead. So again, to be clear, the zoning bylaw does not allow it. We can make that policy very clear in the official plan, as Member Zavitz indicated. Staff has brought a report forward on this on several occasions. This committee has discussed it on numerous occasions, and committee is quite clearly torn on which route to go, whether to allow some passive use or whether to prohibit it outright. And I think Mr. McDonald, Dyment, and I are just looking for clear direction one way or the other, and we can clearly word those policies. I think what could close the loophole is what Chair Bridgman identified. And that's what staff suggested in the report of several years ago, just a clear requirement to have a percentage of open slips. And that way, at least, it's still going to be difficult to enforce because you still need access to see inside the boathouse, but at least a little bit easier when you see open water versus not. So that would be the direction. However, if committee wishes to allow some use, we can potentially consider that direction as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Harding?
Thank you. And I appreciate everyone's discussion. I don't want what I'll call habitable space. People don't need to sleep. They don't need beds. They don't need pull-out couches. Where some people have gone, and for those who have toured the lakes recently, I can name 3 brand new boathouses. Well, one old, but 2 other brand new boathouses that are no slips. 100% for living, and I don't even like the word living accommodation, but socializing down at the water under a roof structure. And I like the look and the approach that says 66% of it, and let's look at the way Director Pink suggested it versus the 33, must be open water. I personally don't have an issue if somebody wants to move their outside couch under a roof, as cottages are 66 feet back or 100 feet, as we have a lot of cliffs where people, it's a journey to get down to the water. And when I'm down there, I might like to have an area I can put a fridge so that I can have a beer on the water without having to walk back and forth, or portable coolers, and we look like Wasaga Beach. I believe the public have gone far too far in creating living rooms on the water. But again, I don't believe if a small portion of it, if that couch is inside, or the seating area, the bar service area, not a washer, dishwasher, full kitchen, I agree. So I like the approach that says 66% must be open to the water below. And I think that helps us get to it. But it's nice for us to say we don't allow this. 80% of the properties that are out there today that have multiple boat slips are closed in. And I'll remind committee, if you remember back in the spring, we had an issue with a gentleman who didn't have room in his boathouse because it was decked in. He wanted to put the boat on a lift beside, and the neighbor was complaining. I encourage you to go for a drive up Lake Joe, because the neighbor's boathouse is also decked in from the inside. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, and through you, I feel very strongly that boathouses are for boats. I think we have let the current situation, frankly, get away from us. But the problem I have, frankly, is not unlike the problem I have with the determination of primary and secondary residence, and that is defining what is okay. A fish station, cleaning station, I suppose, is okay, but I guarantee you those soon will be made out of granite with fancy cooktops baked into them. So to me, it's almost an all or nothing equation. I don't know how to make this definition, even in a million words. I don't know how to make this definition encompass everything that we all seem to think might be okay. and still have it enforceable. But it's not going to be easy. But I think boat houses are for boats. We need to stick to our guns on that. This is not not an easy issue. It's going to take some kickback. But if we truly believe in it, we can't cower away from it just because it's difficult to build and difficult to enforce.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, a boathouse is a boathouse, nothing else. If we're not, let's stop calling the boathouses if we're going to give them 33% of something. So I am not supportive of anything but storage, maybe a refrigerator, but that's it. So Mr. Kennedy, as I see he's there, I don't want him to come on, but it's an enforcement. If we've got a lot of boathouses out there that have closed the door, this is an enforcement problem. So let's start enforcing our current bylaws. Thank you.
This sounds like enforcement officers on the lake next summer taking a look at that, actually. Councillor Hayes.
Through you, I'm going to agree with most of the councillors that came before me. A boathouse is a boathouse. I don't like the idea of using a percentage because that means the people that are allowed the large boathouse, 3-slip boathouse, 2 for boats, 1 for people. And the people that have the smaller boathouse just don't have the room to do anything. I think that we should clearly define so many feet at the front of the boathouse is allowed for walking around the boats. If you have 2 slips, you've got 3. And we define what those areas are. If there's room for a fridge, good for you. Put a bar fridge down there, no problem at all. But a boathouse is for the boat, and there should be only decking to access the boat itself, maybe, and a little bit extra maybe, and that's it.
Okay, Councillor Jaglowitz.
I've listened to this now, and you know what? I think the best answer is the 66%. Let's think about that. I assume you meant the boathouse within the boathouse itself and not the decking on the outside. So let's assume it means that. If you look at a boathouse, if 66% of it is open, you've just got enough room to have some storage at the back and walk around. 66% is a lot of open water. And that may just solve the problem. But think about it. Maybe staff could comment on that. If you take it doesn't matter, 3-slip, 4-slip, whatever. It would leave you with some room at the back and some room. If you want to close a slip in, I don't think you can do it and have 66% of the rest of it open. So if that's the case, that's the end of story, isn't it? Because we're already say it's not a habitable space. So if they want to put their fish counter in there, or as the mayor says, if they want to have some place to put their couch in or so on, like if 66% of it is open water. Anyway, that's just my comment.
Director Pink.
Thank you. Maybe to try to move things along a little bit here, I wouldn't suggest or recommend that we debate the percentage at this stage or put a number in the official plan. I think the fairly clear direction, maybe not by all members, but getting a clear direction that boathouses are for boats. I think these are zoning issues we're talking about. I think what staff can do through the implementing zoning bylaw is come up with that percentage. And I think it largely will address both sides of the concerns. Whatever that appropriate percentage is of open water will largely then prevent excessive habitable living space within, but certainly won't take it away entirely. And if owners certainly can still squeeze the odd patio furniture and a fridge there and utilize it for some small percentage, which it seems like that's generally accepted. So I think the policies can be clear, or Mr. McDonald and I can take another look at them just to make it very clear that boathouses are for boats. They're not to be used for habitable space. And I think this is largely a zoning issue that we can address. What staff's been looking for some time now is that clear direction. I think we've just received it. Boathouses are for boats, and we can proceed in that fashion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pink. But I sense most of this is not even 33%. They just boathouses are for boats. So I agree with you. So Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. And through you, I suppose just, I think David put a fine point on it. And so probably enough said, other than the developments we're talking about are major developments. This is not a couch from what I'm experiencing. And over here on Lake Muskoka, there are many. And you know, I'm all about law enforcement, or bylaw enforcement, of course, big fan of that. But, you know, to put that on Rob Kennedy and his group, you know, the builders come forward and get a building permit. How does a building permit get issued for the kind of development that is at the rock cut at Dudley Bay? That how does that even get built? So, you know, I think we need to, you know, we can talk about 33%, we can talk about percentages, but how does that initially go forward, that the permit is issued for what is clearly something that nobody on this call likes? Thank you.
Okay, so I hear you, Councillor Zavitz. I think that's discussion for another day so that we can keep moving forward. So I believe that Mr. McDonald and Mr. Dyment, you have your boathouses are for boats. I believe that's where we are, unless anybody disagrees. So, okay, what else did we have there, Mr. Pink? Oh, recreational carrying capacity. So at the moment, it is definite, not just a tool. So is there any discussion on wanting to change that before? I'm sure we'll get feedback on this from the public, but to change this before it goes out to the public. And I know, Councillor Hayes, that you were the one who wanted to bring it up. Councillor Hayes.
Yeah, I feel strongly that it should be a part of a toolbox, not the be all end all, because different lakes have different uses, and that should be looked at when you're looking at whether or not development should go forward. And I'm quite happy to leave it in there and have it go to the public, because I believe that they're going to request that we look at this and change it, because it does seem it's a good tool, but it is not the only tool that we should be using. And but if it goes to the public, that's fine. I'm sure we'll maybe hear some very creative ideas on how to manage it.
Okay, thank you. That's I think that means that we're just going to leave it as it is until we get the public feedback, and then of course we'll have and I agree with you. I think there'll be a big discussion on it when it comes back. Anything? I know you had something Councillor Roberts did. Is that the last one? Okay, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. So there's the first part and then the second part. And the first part is that, and some of the delegates earlier talked about the complexity of the official plan. I know that was a theme of conversation with the official plan working committee. So I was reading through it then, and now I'm reading through it again. I'm saying the objectives that are in front of each section are then supported in the text of the section. And I was just saying, I don't think there's a need for it. And specifically, it comes out loud and clear on the aggregate part, where we have 8 objectives. Every one of those objectives is supported in the text of the section. So I'm saying, I think that we should remove the objective sections, and maybe Mr. McDonald can support why we need it there. What's a really benefit when an objective is a goal and you have achieved that goal in your body of report. So that's my first one. Thank you.
Mr. McDonald.
Yeah, through you, Chair Bridgman. Many official plans contain objectives. Official plans are statutory documents, but they're not zoning bylaws. And objectives are helpful when you're interpreting a policy and trying to make a call on what the policy means. And if there is any doubt, then you go back to the objectives for that clarity. Objectives are also very helpful in LPAT hearings. OMB hearings, or land tribunal hearings are called now, because it sets out the overall vision of the municipality what it wants to achieve, and that's what these objectives do. And then those objectives are implemented through policy. My preference is to keep them in there. I think they help in understanding the plan. They aren't policies themselves, they're not tests, but I do think they help understanding what the policies are all about. If we took the objectives out, you'd be jumping right into a policy without there being any context for why the policy says what it does. So I would support keeping them in.
Okay, thank you. All right, so can I have a show of hands? Do we want the objectives to stay in? Okay, so we're going to leave them in, Councillor Roberts. And your second point?
Okay, my second point, now the objectives are still in. Thank you very much, Nick. And I do mean that sincerely. You'll recall that we had a discussion on the aggregate section being more favoring aggregates in Muskoka, and where I propose that we reorder the objectives. It's more just cosmetic. D would come up to prohibit the location of we'd move up B and we'd move up E, or I haven't got the right order, but we'd move up 2 or 3 of them. The one being off the top of my head would be the lessen the impact for environmental, social, and forget the next one. I just get it here in front of me. And the second one is the lakes, that there's no, that should be number 2, that aggregates will be not in any area within 2 kilometers of a lake and possibly of an urban center or a community type of thing. So you shift those 2 up for sure. Are we okay with that? Shifting those up in order?
I'm through you, Chair Bridgman, just to give a quick answer. Yes, I'm okay with that. I will indicate that there is no implied priority in the way the objectives are listed. I mean, that's something I would say on the stand if I was ever asked. But I understand optics are important, so I'm okay with that.
Thank you.
Hey, you good, Councillor Roberts?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I believe that, oh, Councillor Jaglowitz.
Well, actually, I just had 2 general comments when you're done with the specific ones. I don't know if this is the right time or not.
I believe it is. Please go ahead.
Okay, so the first one has to do with the language. I believe at our last meeting, I believe there was an agreement that would be provided, a document that indicated how the language was tightened up with shall and may and what wasn't tightened up and why. I thought it was going to be a deliverable. I didn't see it. So maybe someone could address that. The second part is having to do with the 6 meetings that the working group committee had. As you recall, we met back many, many months ago and gave some direction to the consultants. And then that direction produced a draft, which then went through these 6 meetings and then ended up with what we see. And what I'd like to know is whether from what we as a council or a committee directed, was there any significant change made in those 6 meetings that we should be made aware of? Because we can't tell which changes we agreed to, which changes the small working group did. So that was all just, I don't mean detailed. Was there anything of significance that we might want to look at again? So those were my 2 comments.
Okay, so to the second one, I believe all that information was fed into Mr. McDonald and Mr. Dyment from the working group also. So what you see here is the accumulation of all of that, Councillor Jaglowitz. So I'm a little unclear what you're asking.
Well, let's say we agreed that there should be no boats on Lake Muskoka, and the working group said, no, we're going to have boats on Lake Muskoka. It's just something of significance where the will of the suggestion of council was overruled by not overruled, changed by the working group. I haven't detected anything, by the way, and maybe there was nothing.
So I'm going to ask Councillor Roberts as chair to just step in, but my memory of that from sitting in on them was there weren't significant changes. There were people who disagreed with some things, but we've already been through that. So Councillor Roberts?
Yes, it was, there weren't any really significant changes. The only one I could think of was the percentage of lot disturbance. that came forth off the top of my head. And so.
Thank you. So then the outstanding one is the language. Are we going to deal with that, or is that gone by the board?
Mr. McDonald?
Through you, Chair Bridgman, I do recall having this conversation, and no, I did not prepare a list of the shalls, sorry, the list of the flexible policies that I didn't change. So I can still do that. I'm hoping it doesn't hold up releasing this out for public circulation and review. I can tell you that I did a word search through the entire document and looked at every shall and made a judgment call on each one of them. And I think I've got them all where they need to be. So all I can say is, in a future meeting, I'm happy to have this conversation. I will prepare that list. I haven't done it now, but I think I've gone as far as I could to.
I'm okay to move forward. I just think at some point it'd be nice to have before we approve the final. Thank you.
Fair enough.
Okay, so thank you, committee. I believe Councillor Roberts.
I'm totally sorry, Madam Chair and committee. There's one thing I failed to bring up during the aggregates, is you'll recall that we had a delegation at the August 12th meeting where the concern of the distance of an aggregate from a provincial highway was brought up. And, you know, it's, you know, at that, I think the delegate, if memory serves me correctly, said it should be within 2 kilometers. But are we going to beef up or strengthen that policy within the aggregates?
Well, I think I'm going to direct that back to Mr. McDonald. Do you need guidance from here to do that, Mr. McDonald?
Yeah, I'm a little fuzzy on what that delegate actually said, to be frank, and I might ask Mr. Pink to chime in. What I can tell you is that the 2 kilometer restriction from waterfront area and urban centers pretty well knocks out most of the township already. So I'm not sure what else we would be trying to achieve. Mr. Pink, do you have a better recollection than me on that?
Unfortunately, off the top of my head, I don't. I'd have to pull that report, or specifically the minutes from that meeting, to clarify. Again, keep in mind there's ample opportunity for comments to be received through several stages forthcoming. We can look at that again, but I can forward that presentation that Mr. Crocker made to Mr. McDonald.
If I can speak to it briefly.
Okay, so we can, Mr. Dyment?
Sorry, just to speak to it briefly, as I understand it, the issue is that the policy says that it has to be in close proximity, which by the way means close, but it has to be in proximity to a provincial highway. And what does that actually mean? I know you've got one file before you where the property, I think, is 7 kilometers from a provincial highway. Is that in proximity to a provincial highway? And I think the comment was you need to tighten up the wording there so that it actually can be interpreted.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what I would like to do is read this motion. As Mr. Pink had mentioned, it is twofold. One, Mr. Pink.
Sorry to interrupt. Thank you, Chair. Perhaps if we could just take a brief break. I think because the policy direction regarding deeded access has now been clear direction to put that back, I think that would be good to reference in a resolution. There was a resolution to include deeded access. There was a resolution to remove deeded access. I think just for complete transparency through this process, there should be a resolution showing why, again, now committee has asked to reinsert it. So if you can just bear with me for 5 minutes, I can probably, if we can take a short break, I can craft some wording to the resolution to add that.
Okay, sounds good. So we're back here at 1:45, and we should be very brief at, see everybody shortly. Okay, if we can get everybody back, that would be great. Just need one more, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we. Mhm. So are we good? We have quorum? Yeah. Okay, thank you everybody for indulging in that. So I am going to, I said this motion contains two parts. One is that, oh, Councillor Hayes?
Yeah, I'm just ensuring that this is only to be on severances going forward. And the statement that we made about the township not providing public parking on streets for islanders is going to be included in the update.
I assume that's all going to be part of it, Mr. McDonald? Yes,
Yes, it
will
is.
be. Okay, great. So there's two parts to this. The first one is that the planning committee will be able to do all of the approval process right up to our final approval so that we can knock out that 30-day wait to take it to council after each step. And then this goes out for public comment. So moved by Councillor Zabit, seconded by Councillor Kelly. Be it resolved that Special Planning Committee recommend to Township Council that Council delegate authority to Planning Committee for all decision-making related to the official plan review, save for final adoption. And that the second draft of the new Township of Muskoka Lakes official plan be circulated for public and agency comment, inclusive of the direction received at the September 1st, 2021 Special Planning Committee meeting and inclusive of policy direction number 18 to require deeded access to a property on the mainland for new lot creation of water access properties. And that the public and agency input received on the second draft of the new official plan be reviewed by staff and summarized in a further staff report with recommendations to Planning Committee respecting proposed revisions in order to create a third draft of the Township of Muskoka Lakes official plan, which would eventually be presented to Planning Committee for their consideration. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So thank you. I would like to see receive all written communications input to the official plan. I'm okay with the staff making the decisions, but I would like to see, if we do a survey, I'd like to see all survey results and comments, as well as all written documentation or comments on the official plan. How do we do that?
Well, can we just move this and get through this and then we'll do that? We're in the
Okay,
middle of a motion right now.
I was questioning the motion, whether I'd support it or not. That's just it. We'll put it to after, I'll be fine.
Okay, I see what you mean. I think Director Pink would like to speak then.
Thank you, Chair, through you. As noted in the resolution, I believe in the report, what this will do will allow staff and the consulting team to solicit some input from the community before any changes are made. Similar to the Minette OPA process, staff and the consulting team will come back with a report summarizing all the themes of the comments heard, with an analysis and looking for direction from committee on any potential changes to the draft. Staff will also forward any written submissions received to council, or in this case, if it's done through an online survey, we can certainly forward the survey results in that report.
Okay, thank you. I believe that covers what you were asking for, Councillor Roberts.
Yes, I'd like to see the details. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have a motion in front of us. All in favor? Oh, Councillors Jaglowitz, do you have a question before?
Yes, it was just a clarification. It's my understanding the minor changes that were agreed to today will go forward in the draft before it goes out to the public, and we will see it because it'll be on the public record. Is that the idea? Those changes aren't waiting till the next draft, are they?
No. Oops, sorry. Go ahead.
Just to clarify, the additions I made to the resolution, and the resolution as is in the report, I made two additions. One, that the draft, as you indicated before it circulated, the changes made as per the direction at today's meeting. Obviously, we can't encapsulate all those in the resolution. The only one I specifically identified in addition was that policy direction 18 be included again, and that is with respect to deeded access. But there's also the other changes that were directed will be included in the draft before. And again, council can see that together with the community. It'll go on the Engage page, online survey, etc.
Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Harding.
Thank you. I did vote in favor, and I'm going to continue to vote in favor of the resolution. If we call the question again, I just wanted to thank personally Mr. McDonald and Mr. Dyment and Mr. Pink for all his hard work. This has been a long time coming. Lots of discussion, obviously, lots of changing of our own opinions. But one thing is certainly clear, that as a mandate of this council, clearly to add a layer of protection, especially as referred to the waterfront zone. So appreciate all the work and our own confusion, if you will, through this, where we sometimes go left and then turn around and go right. But certainly appreciate all that. The other thing that I will comment when we do get back the next draft, and especially when we get the public comment, I would really like to understand, because I've heard this a number of times from people, if John Doe was to sever a piece of property and create a new 300-foot lot, what are the implications of this new OP to them? So what additional studies would have to be done, just so we really understand the financial costs of everybody? Because, you know, a lot of this stuff, it's nice to say, but when you add another 5,000 here or 10,000 for a study there and 10,000 for a study, and the time, and it's interesting, Mr. Siff made the comment that it could be 2 to 3 months for site plan approval. Mr. Pink's camera's off right now, but I'm hearing regularly 4 to 6 months for site plan approval going through our committee right now, our council, not our council, but our staff. So I'd be amazed if we get it through in 2 to 3 months. So just all of those implications of what happens, I think we need to digest. So thank you.
Okay, well, you did my thank you speech. Thank you. So, all right, we have a motion in front of us. All those in favor? I think we need this for the clerk to do this again. We good, Madam Clerk? Okay. Thank you very much. And yes, I think as the whole committee, we thank Mr. McDonald, Mr. Dyment, and Mr. Pink. This is a long, involved process. There's no question. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our agenda, I think. Yeah. And let me find my agenda. That's the end, right? So of our special meeting, this is the end. So I am going to read the motion to adjourn. So moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Hayes. Be it resolved that Special Planning Committee adjourn at 12:53 p.m. and the next regular meeting of Planning Committee be held on Thursday, September 16th, 2021 at 9 a.m. electronically from the Council Chambers Municipal Offices in Port Carling, Ontario. All in favor? Okay, well, thank you again, everybody, including our clerk and all our support staff for another special meeting. And please